The storm that changed everything wasn't the fiercest Copper Ridge had ever seen, but it was the one that broke through Sheriff Elias Crenshaw's carefully maintained walls. Not the walls of his weathered barn where his old mare, Buttercup, had just crashed through rotted floorboards. No, the walls around his heart, built brick by brick since Martha died 2 years ago, leaving him with nothing but a badge and bottles of whiskey he couldn't bring himself to drink. As he stared into the perfect rectangular hole where his horse had fallen through, warm air rushed up at his face, carrying the impossible scent of sage and copper in the middle of a Montana thunderstorm. That hole wasn't just an opening in his barn floor. It was an invitation to something that would shatter everything he thought he knew about the town he'd protected for 7 years. Before we dive into the story, I want you to imagine the last time your entire world shifted in a single moment. That's what's about to happen to Sheriff Crenshaw. Click the like button and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss tomorrow's incredible story of redemption and unexpected love. And while you're here, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I love knowing our stories reach people across the world at all hours. Now let's continue with the story. Thunder cracked overhead as Crenshaw lowered his lantern into the hole. Buttercup had already scrambled out, spooked but unharmed, leaving behind something that defied explanation. The walls were smooth limestone, too precise for nature, too old for recent construction. Carved symbols ran along wooden support beams, intricate patterns that weren't Native American, weren't anything from the railroad camps. They seemed to pulse in the flickering light. His deputy would call him foolish for what he did next. Hell, his own common sense screamed at him to wait until morning. Get help. Approach this like the lawman he was. But loneliness makes fools of careful men. And something about that warm air pulling at him felt like Martha's breath on his neck when she used to whisper that he worked too hard, cared too much, forgot to live. The ladder rungs were worn smooth by countless hands. How many people had descended here before him? The tunnel stretched beyond his lantern's reach, sloping gently downward. Water dripped somewhere in the darkness, a rhythm, like a heartbeat. 20 feet in, he found the first artifact, a child's wooden horse, painted red and yellow, abandoned against the wall. Further along, a woman's locket, the photograph inside water damaged beyond recognition. Then a leather journal, its pages filled with entries in German, Chinese, Spanish, and languages he couldn't identify. The tunnel wasn't just old, it was actively used. Fresh boot prints marked the dusty floor. Someone had been here within days, maybe hours. The warmth intensified as he descended, and that metallic sage scent grew stronger. The tunnel curved left and suddenly opened into a natural cavern that stole his breath. Limestone columns stretched up into darkness. Steam rose from a natural hot spring that bubbled in the center. But it was the signs of habitation that stopped his heart. Bedrolls, cooking supplies, medical equipment, arranged with careful precision, and books, dozens of books in multiple languages. Someone hadn't just passed through here. Someone lived here, hidden beneath his own property, beneath the town he thought he knew. The lantern light caught something that made Crenshaw's blood freeze. Fresh blood, still glistening, led from the hot spring toward a shadowed alcove behind the largest limestone column. His hand moved to his Colt, .45. Though drawing, it felt wrong in this strange sanctuary. The blood trail was significant. Whoever left it was badly hurt. He followed it, his boots echoing in the vast space, each step taking him further from the sheriff he'd been just an hour ago. Behind the column, wrapped in blankets that couldn't hide her violent shivering, lay a young woman, maybe 25, though pain had a way of aging faces. Her dark hair was braided with small bones and feathers, an unusual style he'd never seen in Copper Ridge. She wore men's work clothes, but they were soaked through with blood from a gunshot wound in her left shoulder. The injury had gone bad, the skin around it angry red with infection lines spreading like poison rivers under her skin. Her eyes snapped open when he knelt beside her, green as spring grass, wild with fever and fear. She tried to reach for something, maybe a weapon, but her strength failed. Words tumbled from her cracked lips in accented English. They killed. The others. Said we were witches, demons, but we only helped them escape. Her hand grabbed his wrist with surprising strength. They will come when they realize I survived. They always come. Crenshaw had seen enough death to know she was close to it. The infection had spread too far, her fever burning so hot he could feel it radiating from her skin. Any decent lawman would ride for the doctor, report this to the authorities, follow procedure. But something in those green eyes reminded him of Martha in her final days, fighting against the consumption, begging him to save her when they both knew he couldn't. He'd failed Martha. The guilt of it had hollowed him out, left him a walking ghost with a badge. "Who are they?" he asked, already pulling off his coat to add to her blankets. "Who did this to you?" "Thornfield," she whispered, and the name hit him like cold water. Jacob Thornfield, the richest rancher in 3 counties, the man who smiled at church socials and donated to the school fund. He found our station, the underground, as we helped them run north. Slaves, Chinese, native families, the beaten wives, anyone who needed to disappear. Crenshaw's mind raced. An underground railroad here, operating beneath his own barn. How many desperate souls had passed through while he slept above, enforcing laws that sometimes protected the wrong people? He thought of the journal he'd found, the wooden horse, the locket. Stories of escape, each one a life saved or lost. The woman's breathing grew more labored. Without thinking, he made his choice. Not the lawman's choice, but a human one. He'd seen Martha die following all the proper procedures, waiting for doctors who couldn't help, medicines that didn't work. This time would be different. His grandmother had taught him frontier medicine before he'd ever picked up a badge. Taught him about willow bark for fever, honey and whiskey for infection, hot springs for drawing out poison. "What's your name?" he asked, already moving to gather what he needed from the medical supplies scattered around the cavern. "Sarah," she managed. "My mother was the healer they burned. You tried to stop them. I saw you 2 years ago. The same month, your wife died." The memory hit him like a physical blow. The mob, the accusations of witchcraft, his failed attempt to maintain order. He'd been outnumbered, overwhelmed, and ultimately useless, just like with Martha. But here, now, in this hidden place beneath the earth, maybe he could finally do something right. Maybe saving Sarah could begin to balance the scales of his failures. The thunder rumbled overhead, muffled by tons of rock and earth, as Sheriff Elias Crenshaw began to transform into something more than law and guilt. The next 3 days blurred together in that underground cavern, marked only by Sarah's fever spikes and the changing quality of steam from the hot springs. Crenshaw hadn't returned to town, hadn't reported to his office, had simply vanished into the earth to wage war against infection and death. He crushed willow bark between stones, boiled it with honey he found in the supplies, and forced the mixture between Sarah's lips every few hours. The wound itself he cleaned with whiskey, each application drawing screams that echoed through the tunnels like accusations. On the second night, when her fever peaked so high she spoke only in what sounded like Romanian, he carried her to the hot spring's edge. The mineral-rich water was known for its healing properties, though most folks in Copper Ridge dismissed such talk as Indian nonsense. He held her in the warm water, supporting her weight while she thrashed and mumbled about birds made of smoke and mothers who walked through walls. Her fever broke just before dawn, sudden as summer rain, leaving her limp but breathing steady for the first time since he'd found her. When she finally woke properly, truly present behind those green eyes, she studied him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "You stayed," she said, voice rough as sandpaper. "A lawman who stayed to help instead of arrest. My mother said such men existed, but I never believed her." "Your mother," Crenshaw said, wringing out a cloth in the spring water. "She was the healer they called Regina?" Sarah nodded slowly. "She taught me everything. How to set bones, birth babies, cure fever. How to read the old signs in the tunnels. The ones the Chinese workers left when they built this network. They were escaping too, you see. From the railroad companies that worked them to death. They found these natural caves and connected them, tunnel by tunnel, creating a web beneath the earth. A world where the hunted could become human again. She gestured weakly toward the shadows beyond the spring. Would you like to meet them? The ones who still hide here? Before Crenshaw could respond, shapes emerged from the darkness. First, a massive black man with scars across his back that told their own story. He moved with the careful grace of someone who'd learned to be both powerful and invisible. Behind him, two Chinese families, the children clutching wooden toys, the adults watching Crenshaw with justified suspicion. Last came a native boy, maybe 12, with eyes that had seen too much. This is Samuel, Sarah said, indicating the black man. He escaped from Texas 5 years ago. He protects us now, guards the entrances, teaches the children to read. Samuel nodded, his expression unreadable. The Chen and Liu families run goods between the tunnel stops, trading with sympathetic merchants above. And Thomas, she smiled at the native boy, his whole tribe was massacred at Willow Creek. He knows every tunnel, every cave, every hidden path for 300 miles. Crenshaw felt his understanding of the world reshaping itself. Beneath his town, beneath the saloons and churches and proper society that pretended civilization, existed this shadow community of survivors. They'd built something down here in the darkness, something that might be more honest than anything that existed in the sunlight above. How many people have you moved through here? He asked. Hundreds, Sarah said, her voice gaining strength. Maybe more. North to Canada, west to California, anywhere but here. My mother started it, but after she died, I continued. Someone had to. She paused, studying his face. You could arrest us all. It's your duty, isn't it? We're harboring fugitives, breaking federal laws, defying the order you're sworn to protect. The badge in his pocket felt heavier than the mountain above them. Everything she said was true. The law was clear about harboring fugitives, about aiding escape, about maintaining order. But sitting in this cavern, surrounded by people whose only crime was surviving, he thought about all the times the law had failed to protect the innocent. Martha had died within the law. Regina had burned within the law. How many more had suffered while he upheld statutes that protected property over people? Your mother, Crenshaw said, settling beside the hot spring while Sierra rested against the smooth rocks. She wasn't from here originally. Romania, Sierra confirmed, her fingers tracing patterns in the mineral deposits. She came as a child with my grandparents, fleeing something she never spoke about. They settled in Missouri first, but the war drove them west. She learned healing from the Cherokee before they were forced out, combined it with what her mother had taught her from the old country. By the time she reached Copper Ridge, she could cure things the town doctor couldn't even name. Samuel had started a fire in a natural chimney formation that drew smoke up through hidden vents. The Chen children played quietly with wooden blocks while their parents prepared a meal from dried goods and preserved vegetables. It felt impossibly domestic, this underground home, like a photograph of normal life developed in darkness. The women came to her first, Sarah continued. The ones whose husbands drank too much, hit too hard. She'd treat their wounds, give them herbs to prevent babies they couldn't feed. Then came the fugitives. A Spanish family fleeing range wars. Chinese workers escaped from virtual slavery on the railroad. Samuel, running from men who'd burn him alive for defending himself against a white overseer. She couldn't turn them away. How did Thornfield find out? Sarah's expression darkened. A woman named Catherine Morse. Her husband beat her something terrible, broke her arm in 2 places. Mother set the bone, gave her shelter for 3 days while she healed. But Catherine got scared, went back to him, and he forced her to tell him where she'd been. He went straight to Thornfield, knowing there was bounty money for fugitives. The memory of that night rushed back to Crenshaw with brutal clarity. The torch-bearing mob, Thornfield at its head, dragging Regina from her home. He tried to stop them, demanded due process, proper trial. They'd laughed at him, said witches didn't deserve white man's law. He'd drawn his gun but been overwhelmed by sheer numbers, knocked unconscious. When he woke, Regina was already burning, and Martha was at home, coughing blood into handkerchiefs. You were there, he said, the realization hitting him. In the crowd. You saw everything. I saw you try, Sarah said softly. Saw you stand against 30 men for a foreign woman everyone called witch. You failed, yes, but you tried. That's why I didn't run when you found me. If Sheriff Crenshaw wanted me dead or arrested, I figured I'd already be both." Thomas approached them, silent as shadow, and handed Crenshaw a worn piece of paper. It was a map showing the tunnel system in detail. 5 exits, each emerging in abandoned homesteads or natural formations miles from town. The network stretched further than he'd imagined, a lifeline hidden beneath the brutal landscape. "We were moving 3 families north this week," Sarah explained. "A Negro family from Alabama, running from men who'd kill them for voting. A Chinese girl sold to a brothel, barely 14. And a white woman with 2 children, fleeing a husband who'd already killed their oldest in a drunken rage. Thornfield's men caught them at the Baxter farm exit. The family scattered, but most were captured. I led his riders away, took a bullet for it. Thought I'd die down here, but maybe that was fitting, dying where my mother's work lived on." "She saved my son," one of the Chinese mothers said suddenly, her English careful but clear. "When the railroad boss wanted to sell him," said Chinese boys, "made good servants. Your mother hid us, taught us English, gave us new names for the papers. We are not slaves, we are people. Because of her." Crenshaw looked around the cavern, at these faces that represented every kind of person the law said shouldn't exist, shouldn't matter, shouldn't be protected. Yet here they were, protecting each other, creating a community based on nothing more than shared humanity and mutual survival. The badge in his pocket felt like a lie he'd been telling himself for years. The 4th morning brought unexpected snow, early even for Montana October. Crenshaw knew this, because Thomas had returned from the surface with frost in his hair and news that search parties were looking for the missing sheriff. The boy also brought something else, a wanted poster with Sierra's likeness, drawn with surprising accuracy. "Dangerous foreign woman," it read. "Wanted for theft, witchcraft, and corrupting Christian souls. $500 reward." $500? Sarah laughed bitterly from where she sat grinding herbs. "I'm worth more than most horses." Mother would be proud. Her strength was returning daily, the infection finally retreating. She'd taken to teaching the Chen children English while their parents taught her Mandarin phrases. It was surreal, watching this cultural exchange in a cave while above them, men with guns searched for criminals who were guilty only of kindness. "Tell me about that night," Crenshaw said suddenly. "After your mother died? What happened to you?" Sarah's hand stilled on the mortar and pestle. "I hid in the root cellar when they came. Mother had always said if trouble came, go underground, find the tunnels. I listened to them drag her away, heard her telling them in 3 languages that she forgave them. They didn't understand Romanian or Cherokee, but the forgiveness in English made them angrier." She stood, moving to a natural shelf carved into the limestone where medical supplies were stored. "After they left, I gathered what I could. Mother's journals, her medicines, the names and faces of everyone we'd helped. I found the tunnel entrance she'd marked. Same symbols you saw, the ones the Chinese workers used to mark safe passages. I've been down here 2 years now, surfacing only when necessary, continuing her work. The same 2 years I've been sheriff, enforcing laws, never knowing this existed beneath my feet." "You were grieving," Sarah said simply. "Grief makes us blind to everything except our own pain. I know. I spent months wanting to poison Thornfield's well, burn his ranch, make him suffer like she suffered. Samuel stopped me, said revenge would dishonor everything Mother died for. He was right, but God, how I hated him for being right. Samuel himself emerged from one of the connecting tunnels, snow on his boots. "Sheriff's deputy is at your house," he reported to Crenshaw. "Young man nervous, keeps checking the barn. Roy Hutchins," Crenshaw said. "Good kid, follows orders, asks few questions. He'll report back that I'm missing if I don't surface soon." "Then go," Sarah said, but her voice carried something beneath the practicality. "Tell them you were tracking rustlers, got caught in the storm. Your life above doesn't have to end because you found us." But even as she said it, they both knew it was already too late for that. Crenshaw had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. Every moment he spent here without reporting it made him more criminal than lawman. Yet looking at Thomas teaching the Chen children a crow hunting song, at Samuel carefully mending a torn coat, at Sarah standing there with her mother's strength despite Thornfield's bullet still healing in her shoulder, he couldn't imagine betraying them. "There's something else," Sarah said, moving closer. "The night Mother died, the night you tried to save her, I saw you crying afterward. You sat in the ashes where they burned her, and you wept. Not just tears, but the kind of crying that breaks ribs. I wanted to comfort you, but I was afraid. Later I learned your wife had died that same week. You were mourning them both, weren't you? The woman you couldn't save, and the woman you couldn't cure." The truth of it hit him like a physical blow. He had mourned them together, had conflated his failures into one massive weight that pressed on his chest every morning. Martha and Regina, two women. The world had failed. Two deaths that proved his inadequacy. But here was Regina's daughter, alive despite everything, carrying on work that mattered more than any law he'd ever enforced. Crenshaw emerged from the tunnel into a world transformed by snow and suspicion. He'd been gone 4 days, an eternity for a sheriff to vanish without word. The story he'd prepared about tracking rustlers felt thin as paper against the calculating look in Jacob Thornfield's eyes when the rancher appeared at his door that very evening, flanked by 3 hired guns whose reputations preceded them like shadows. "Elias," Thornfield said, his smile not reaching his eyes. "We were worried. A sheriff disappearing right after that unfortunate incident with the foreign witch's daughter. People might draw conclusions." "What incident?" Crenshaw kept his voice steady, hanging his coat with deliberate calm. "I've been tracking cattle thieves toward the northern passes. Got caught by the early snow." "Interesting." Thornfield moved through the small house like he owned it, which, in a way, he did, holding the mortgage on half the properties in Copper Ridge. "Your deputy said you hadn't taken your tracking gear, or your spare ammunition, or provisions, almost like you didn't go far at all." The implied threat hung between them like a loaded gun. Crenshaw met his gaze directly, calling on every poker game he'd ever played to keep his expression neutral. "Roy's a good kid, but he doesn't know everything about how I work. Sometimes the best tracking happens when you travel light." One of Thornfield's men, a scarred gunslinger named Wade, spoke up. "Funny thing, Sheriff. We found blood trails leading toward this area. The witch girl was hit bad. Probably couldn't have gone far. You sure you haven't seen anything unusual? Besides you boys showing up at my door after dark?" Crenshaw let a hint of sheriff's authority creep into his voice. "No, nothing unusual. But if this woman is wounded and dangerous like you say, maybe you should file an official report. We could organize a proper search, follow legal procedures." Thornfield laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Legal procedures? Like the ones you tried to enforce when we dealt with her mother? Some situations call for swifter justice, Sheriff." "Surely you've learned that by now." They stared at each other across the small room, 2 men measuring the distance between law and power. Crenshaw could feel the tunnel entrance beneath his barn floor calling to him. Could imagine Sarah down there, probably aware through Thomas's reconnaissance that danger stood directly above her. The Chen children would be hushed. Samuel would have his hands on whatever weapon he'd fashioned, and they'd all be waiting to see if their sanctuary would hold. "I'll keep an eye out," Crenshaw finally said. "If I see any foreign women practicing witchcraft, you'll be the first to know." Thornfield's smile widened, recognizing the mockery, but choosing to ignore it. "You do that, Elias. And perhaps you should know, I've increased the reward. $1,000 now, for anyone who brings me the witch or information leading to her capture. That's more than you make in 2 years. Enough to tempt even an honest man." After they left, tracking snow and threat through his house, Crenshaw sat in the dark for a long moment. He could feel the weight of decision pressing down like the mountain itself. Below, Sarah and the others waited. Above, Thornfield circled like a buzzard, patient and certain. The smart choice was obvious. Turn them in, collect the reward, continue being sheriff. The right choice was equally clear. Protect them, lose everything, become a criminal himself. He thought of Martha, how she'd always said his stubborn sense of right would get him killed someday. She'd said it with love, with pride, even knowing he couldn't be any other way. Maybe she'd been prophetic. Or maybe, just maybe, that stubborn righteousness would finally serve a purpose worth the cost. Moving carefully in case Thornfield had left watchers, Crenshaw gathered supplies that wouldn't be missed. Extra blankets from the cedar chest, medicines from Martha's old supplies, ammunition that wasn't logged in his official inventory. Each item he packed was another step away from the law, another step towards something he couldn't quite name but felt more real than any badge he'd ever worn. By lamplight in the cavern's depths, Sarah spread out a detailed map drawn on cloth, its edges worn from handling. The tunnel system sprawled across it like veins, connecting 5 abandoned homesteads in a rough circle around Copper Ridge. Each exit was marked with symbols, Chinese characters, Cherokee signs, and what Crenshaw now recognized as Romanian protective marks. The Baxter farm here, she pointed to the eastern exit. That's where Thornfield caught the families. But he doesn't know about the others. The Morrison claim to the north, the old Yates homestead west, the Brennan ruin south, and of course, your barn. Her finger traced the routes. We move people between them, never the same pattern twice. Samuel scouts ahead, Thomas watches for pursuit. The Chen families maintain supplies at each stop. How many are hiding now? Crenshaw asked. 17, Samuel answered, his deep voice echoing slightly. 5 Negro families waiting to move north, 3 Chinese workers from the new railroad expansion, 2 Mexican brothers accused of horse theft they didn't commit, and a white woman who killed her husband after he murdered their daughter. Each story was a weight, a life hanging in balance. Crenshaw studied the map, his lawman's mind automatically calculating distances, blind spots, defensive positions. Thornfield will watch the Baxter exit now. He's smart enough to know there must be others. Which is why we need to move everyone within the week, Sarah said. Before the real winter comes. Before Thornfield finds another entrance. But I can't guide them alone. Not with this shoulder still healing. Thomas suddenly appeared from a tunnel, moving with the unsettling silence he'd perfected. He signed something rapidly to Samuel, who tensed. Riders, Samuel translated. 6 of them, checking the Morrison claim. That's 2 miles north, Crenshaw calculated quickly. If they find that entrance. They won't, Sarah said with quiet confidence. The Morrisons died of scarlet fever 3 years ago. Everyone thinks the place is cursed. We encourage that belief, left certain signs that make superstitious men nervous. But if they're desperate enough to search there anyway. She was already moving, gathering medical supplies into a pack. Crenshaw noticed how efficiently she worked despite her injury, how the others responded to her unspoken commands. This wasn't just a hiding place. It was a functioning community with Sarah as its unofficial leader, continuing her mother's work with a competence that belied her years. I need to show you something, she said to Crenshaw, leading him deeper into the cave system. They passed through chambers he hadn't seen before, storage areas carved from rock, a natural spring that provided fresh water, even a small chamber set up as a schoolroom where slate tablets showed lessons in multiple languages. They stopped at a wooden door set into a natural doorway, reinforced with iron bands. Sarah produced a key from around her neck. Inside, the lamplight revealed shelves of journals, hundreds of them, dating back 15 years. Every person we've helped, she explained. Their names, their stories, where they went. Mother started it. She said someone should remember them, that they deserved to be more than just escapees. Crenshaw pulled one journal at random, reading an entry about a Korean family fleeing persecution in California, helped north to Canada in 1876. Another told of an Irish woman escaping an arranged marriage to a man 40 years her senior. Page after page of humanity's desperate reaches for freedom, all flowing through these hidden tunnels. This is evidence, he said quietly. If Thornfield finds this, he'll have proof of what he already suspects, Sarah finished. That we're not just hiding 1 or 2 fugitives, but that we've been running an entire underground railroad for over a decade. that some of Copper Ridge's most respectable citizens have helped us, donated supplies, turned blind eyes, the banker's wife who brings medicine, the general store owner who never notices missing provisions, your own deputy who sometimes patrols very loudly near the exits, warning anyone below. Roy? Crenshaw's surprise was genuine. Roy Hutchins knows. He knows enough. His sister was one of the beaten wives Mother helped escape 5 years ago. He's never said anything directly, but he helps in his own way, or at least he did. Thornfield's money might change that. $1,000 breaks a lot of loyalties. The knock came at 3 in the morning. Urgent and desperate. Crenshaw opened his door to find Roy Hutchins standing in the snow, his young face twisted with anguish. "Sheriff, I've done something terrible. God forgive me, I've done something terrible. Come inside, boy." Crenshaw pulled him in, noting the deputy's hands shaking like autumn leaves. "What's happened?" "Thornfield, he knew about my sister. Said if I didn't help him, he'd track her down in Canada, bring her back to her husband. Said he had connections with bounty hunters up north." Roy collapsed into a chair, head in his hands. "I told him about the barn. Your barn. Told him I'd seen you going in there at odd hours." "He's coming at dawn with dynamite. Plans to blow the tunnel, trap everyone inside." The world crystallized into sharp focus. Dawn was 2 hours away. 2 hours to evacuate 17 refugees, the underground families, and all evidence of the network. Crenshaw grabbed Roy's shoulders. "You came to warn us. That counts for something. Now listen carefully. You're going to help us fix this." They descended through the barn floor together, Roy gasping when he saw the tunnel's reality. In the main cavern, Crenshaw's sharp whistle brought everyone running. "Thornfield knows. We have 2 hours before he brings hellfire down on us. We evacuate now, all 5 exits simultaneously." Sarah took charge with the natural authority of someone born to crisis. "Samuel, take the Negro families through the Yates exit. They're the strongest walkers, can handle the rough terrain. Chen families, you know the Brennan route best. Take the Mexican brothers with you. Thomas, guide the Chinese workers through Morrison. Use the fever story to keep locals away." "What about the woman who killed her husband?" Samuel asked. "I'll take her through Baxter," Sarah decided. "Thornfield won't expect us to use the compromised exit." "Sheriff, you'll need to be visible in town when this happens. Establish an alibi." "Like hell," Crenshaw said flatly. "I'm not leaving you to face this alone." Their eyes met across the cavern, something unspoken passing between them. These past days had created a bond neither fully understood, born of shared loss and found purpose. Sarah nodded slowly. "Then we make our stand here. Roy, you'll help evacuate the journals, the evidence. Take them to your sister's old hiding spot, the one your family never told anyone about." The next hour moved with desperate efficiency. Families gathered their meager possessions. Children were bundled against the cold. Supplies were distributed. The Chen mothers pressed small paper packets into everyone's hands. Herbs for healing, protection, luck. Thomas drew maps in charcoal on cloth, showing secondary routes if the primary paths were blocked. As the evacuees filed toward their respective exits, Sarah and Crenshaw worked to create misdirection. They placed blankets and supplies to suggest movement toward the northern passages, left false trails that would buy time. Roy returned from hiding the journals, his face set with determination. "I'll stand with you. It's the least I can do." "No," Crenshaw said firmly. "You'll establish my alibi. Go to the saloon. Get visibly drunk. Tell everyone I sent you to investigate rustling reports south of town. When Thornfield's men come, you know nothing." Dawn approached like an execution. Through Thomas's network of watchers, they knew Thornfield's men were positioning themselves around the barn. 12 riders, armed, with enough dynamite to crater the entrance. But the refugees were away, scattered to the winds through exits Thornfield didn't know existed. The Underground Railroad would survive even if its heart was destroyed. Sarah stood beside Crenshaw in the cavern, her hand finding his in the darkness. "My mother would have liked you," she said softly. "She always said the best laws were written on hearts, not paper." "We could run," he offered one last time. Take the western exit, disappear into the mountains. And let him win? Let him think fear conquered justice? She squeezed his hand. No, we finished this properly. Besides, you're still sheriff. You have authority he doesn't expect you to use. Above them, they heard Thornfield's voice, magnified by the cave's acoustics. Sheriff Crenshaw, we know you're down there with the witch. Come out, and we might let you live long enough to stand trial. Crenshaw loaded his rifle, checked his Colt, and pulled out something else. A leather portfolio containing documents he'd been collecting for days. Evidence of Thornfield's crimes, gathered from the journals, from testimonies carefully recorded. Murder, claim jumping, human trafficking, conspiracy. Crenshaw emerged from the barn into the brittle dawn light, badge prominently displayed, his rifle held but not aimed. Thornfield's men formed a semicircle, their breath steaming in the cold air. The rancher himself sat his horse like a king surveying rebellious subjects, dynamite bundles visible in his saddlebags. Jacob Thornfield, Crenshaw called out, his voice carrying the full weight of his office. You're under arrest for the murders of Regina Dalka, Samuel Morrison, and Chen Wei for conspiracy to traffic human beings across state lines. For claim jumping on the Henderson and Yates properties. I have sworn testimonies and documented evidence. Several of Thornfield's men exchanged uncertain glances. They'd come to catch a witch, not to fight the law itself. Thornfield laughed, but it sounded forced. You've lost your mind, Elias. Harboring fugitives has made you forget which side you're on. I know exactly which side I'm on, Crenshaw replied, pulling out the leather portfolio. The side that has evidence you killed Morrison and his family with poison, not scarlet fever, to claim their land. The Chen family you had beaten to death for refusing to sell you their mining claim. Every crime documented by Regina Dalka before you burned her. She knew what you were. Kept records. Those records are now in federal hands. It was a bluff. Partially. Roy had the documents, not federal marshals. But Thornfield didn't know that. More importantly, his hired guns were starting to realize they might be accomplices to crimes bigger than catching one foreign woman. Wade, the scarred gunslinger, slowly moved his hand away from his pistol. Even if any of that were true, Thornfield said, his composure cracking, you're still harboring a dangerous criminal. The woman is wanted. By who? Sarah's voice rang out as she emerged from the barn, standing tall despite her healing shoulder. By you? A wanted poster you printed yourself isn't legal documentation. I've broken no laws except the ones that exist in your mind. She moved to stand beside Crenshaw, and in that morning light, with her dark hair catching the sun, she looked remarkably like her mother. Several of Thornfield's men who'd been at Regina's burning shifted uncomfortably, perhaps remembering what they'd done, what they'd been part of. Here's what's going to happen, Crenshaw said, his sheriff's authority unwavering. You're going to leave, all of you. You're going to forget about this barn, these tunnels, and anyone who might have used them. Because if you don't, those documents reach the territorial governor, who's been looking for an excuse to send federal troops to deal with vigilante justice in Montana. You're bluffing, Thornfield snarled, but uncertainty colored his voice. Am I? Crenshaw pulled out a telegram, genuine this time, from the governor's office acknowledging receipt of his preliminary report about vigilante activities. He'd sent it 3 days ago, insurance he'd hoped not to need. Governor Potts is very interested in why so many homesteaders end up dead or disappeared around Copper Ridge. Bad for the territory's reputation, bad for statehood ambitions. The silence stretched like a held breath. Then Wade spoke up. I didn't sign up to fight the federal government, Thornfield, or to be investigated for murders I didn't know about. There's also the matter of the $500 in gold you're carrying, Sarah added, her voice steady. Blood money for turning in escaped slaves to Southern bounty hunters. The Reconstruction courts would be very interested in that. It was masterful, watching her work. Every word calculated to divide Thornfield from his men, to make them question whether their loyalty was worth federal prosecution. One by one, the hired guns began backing their horses away, creating distance between themselves and their employer. This isn't over, Thornfield promised, his face dark with rage. You think you've won something here? I own this town. I own the debts, the mortgages, the fear. You've bought yourself time, nothing more. Time is all anyone ever has, Sarah replied quietly. The difference is what we do with it. My mother used hers to save lives. You use yours to end them. Which legacy do you think lasts longer? Thornfield raised his rifle then, pointing it directly at Sarah. Everything slowed. Crenshaw moved without thinking, stepping in front of her as Thornfield's finger touched the trigger. But the shot that rang out wasn't from Thornfield's gun. Wade had drawn and fired, his bullet striking Thornfield's weapon, sending it spinning into the snow. "There's a bounty on you too, Thornfield," Wade said, his gun still trained on the rancher. $5,000 from Texas for killing that ranger's family 10 years back. You thought nobody knew, but Regina Dalka wasn't the only one keeping records. Sometimes the hunted become hunters. The other hired guns had drawn their weapons now, but they were pointed at Thornfield, not Crenshaw. The promise of $5,000 had shifted their loyalty faster than any appeal to justice could have. They bound Thornfield with his own rope, ignoring his threats and promises, focused only on the fortune he represented. As they rode away with their former employer, Wade tipped his hat to Crenshaw. "Sheriff, ma'am. Seems justice comes in strange packages sometimes." In the silence that followed, Crenshaw and Sarah stood together in the snow, processing what had just happened. The tunnel system was safe, the refugees were free, and Thornfield would face trial in Texas where his money and influence meant nothing. It felt surreal, like waking from a long nightmare to find the world fundamentally changed. "Your badge," Sarah said softly, pointing to the star on his chest. "You can't keep it now." "Not after publicly defending me, threatening to expose the town's complicity. They'll demand your resignation." She was right. By noon, the town council had gathered, their faces grave with the kind of disappointment reserved for heroes who'd fallen from grace. Crenshaw placed his badge on the table without argument, without defense. He'd upheld the law that mattered, even if it wasn't the law they recognized. Roy Hutchins was appointed interim sheriff, his guilt over his near betrayal making him fiercely protective of the secret he now guarded. His first official act was to declare the tunnel system a geological hazard and bar anyone from exploring it, giving the Underground Railroad the protection of law even if its true purpose remained hidden. Spring came early that year, melting snow and old grudges alike. Without Thornfield's influence, the town began to change. The banker's wife openly visited Sarah for medical treatment, no longer hiding her support. The general store owner accidentally left supplies near the tunnel entrances, never asking why they disappeared. The preacher gave sermons about good Samaritans and the danger of casting first stones. Crenshaw and Sarah transformed the barn into a legitimate way station for travelers, an inn of sorts that asked few questions and offered safe harbor to anyone who needed it. The tunnels below became an open secret, unspoken but understood. Sometimes, late at night, shadows would emerge from hidden entrances, people with haunted eyes and hopeful hearts, heading north to freedom or west to new beginnings. They married on the first day of summer, the ceremony held in the cavern where they'd first met. Samuel performed the service, having revealed he'd been a preacher before slavery stole his freedom. The Chen families provided a feast that mixed Chinese, Romanian, Cherokee, and frontier traditions. Thomas played a Crow blessing song on a wooden flute. Even Roy attended, bringing his sister down from Canada for the occasion, her presence a testament to the lives this place had saved. "Do you regret it?" Sarah asked one evening months later, as they sat by the hot spring that had saved her life. "Losing your badge, your position, everything you worked for?" Crenshaw pulled her close, feeling the solid weight of her against him, real in a way his old life never had been. "I spent 2 years as a ghost wearing a badge, enforcing laws that protected the powerful and abandoned the desperate. Martha would have hated what I'd become. But this work we do, these people we help, this life we've built from darkness and hope, this is what she would have wanted. What your mother died believing in." The tunnels still run beneath Copper Ridge, though the town has grown and changed around them. They tell stories now about the sheriff who chose humanity over law, about the healer's daughter who survived to carry on sacred work, about the underground world where the hunted became human. Some say it's legend, frontier mythology grown wild with retelling. But sometimes, when storms drive desperate souls to seek shelter, they find a barn with strange symbols carved in its beams, and beneath it, tunnels leading to sanctuary. The last entry in Sarah's journal, written in her mother's Romanian and her father's English, simply reads, "We are all looking for home. Sometimes we find it in the last place we'd expect, with the last person we'd imagine, doing work we never thought we were strong enough to do. The badge never made him a protector. The choice did. The tunnels never made us criminals. Compassion did. And love, well, love makes us all outlaws in the end, stealing moments of happiness from a world that would deny them." Today, 17 more souls passed through to freedom. Tomorrow, there will be others. The work continues. The light persists, especially underground, especially in darkness. Before we wrap up this incredible journey, I want to leave you with this thought. Beneath every town, every society, every system of law, run invisible tunnels where humanity persists, despite everything trying to crush it. Click the like button and subscribe to our channel, because tomorrow I'll share another powerful story of courage and redemption that will leave you breathless. Thank you for joining Sheriff Crenshaw and Sarah on their journey from darkness to light, from law to justice, from loneliness to love. Remember, sometimes the greatest treasures aren't found in mountains of gold, but in the choices we make when no one's watching, in the people we save when the law says we shouldn't, and in the love we find when we finally stop running from ourselves. Until tomorrow's story, keep seeking those hidden tunnels of hope in your own life.